Hello everyone, welcome to Inconvenient Truths. I'm your host, Jennifer Zeng. You may or may have not heard about a very famous sentence a while ago during the Winter Olympics. I'm American when in the US and Chinese when in China. It was by Eileen Gu, who was born in the US but chose to represent China. She said that sentence when reporters asked her about her citizenship. Well, after the Russian-Ukraine war broke out, people added another part to that famous sentence, which is, I'm Japanese in Ukraine. What does this mean? We'll talk about this today, as well as the CCP's role in this war and how things could develop from here. Again, before we talk about ugly things, something peaceful and beautiful first.
Experience China before communism. The life-changing performance. Shen Yun. Buy tickets on shenyun.com.
This ad is for the Lincoln Center in New York. It will be there from March 10th to 20th. Tickets are on sale now. Shen Yun has 7 equally large companies that are touring the US and Europe now. They will also go to Canada, Mexico, Australia, New Zealand, and Taiwan. You can type in the web address on the screen, that is shenyun.show/Jennifer-Zeng to check the show schedule in your city. Buy from this address and you will avoid the handling fee. It is a special offer for the audience of my channel only, but you are welcome to share it with friends and family. I have already put this URL in the description box so you can easily forward it to your friends and family so that they can also benefit. In this troubling time in the world, give yourself and your family a break by watching Shen Yun. You will gain more than what you will see and hear on the surface, I promise. Although Shen Yun is definitely a dazzling feast for your eyes and ears. Now, let's go to our topics today. What does it mean by I'm Japanese in Ukraine? Well, I think we all know that the CCP was very much aware that Russia was going to invade Ukraine way before the invasion actually happened. The US had kept saying that Russia might invade Ukraine too. Many countries notified their citizens and arranged the evacuation of their diplomats in Ukraine before the invasion. But the CCP did nothing. It neither notified its 6,000 plus citizens in Ukraine about the upcoming war or arranged any evacuation. Instead, on the day when the war broke out, the CCP's embassy in Ukraine posted a notice in its WeChat account saying that stay at home when you can during this chaos. Stay in communication with other Chinese people and various Chinese associations and check information released by the Chinese embassy. If you need to drive for a long trip, you can put a Chinese flag on a prominent place on the body of your car. Why did the Chinese embassy ask Chinese citizens to put a Chinese flag on their cars to protect themselves? Well, it's because in the famous propaganda CCP movie called World War II, there is such a scene. When driving through a war zone between two armies, the main character in the movie decisively throws down his weapons, uses his arm as a flagpole, holds the CCP's 5-star red flag high, and leads the convoy slowly through the combat zone. With the attention of the soldiers from the two fighting armies, the CCP's red flag flutters in the wind. Everyone feels so proud, so confident and determined. So it turns out that the CCP's flag is more powerful than weapons, as both armies stop shooting and let them pass, as they are awed by the powerful CCP flag. Therefore, inspired by that movie, the CCP's embassy in Ukraine asked Chinese people in Ukraine to put up a CCP flag on their cars to protect themselves. And you know what? CCP flags were immediately sold out in Kiev. Many Chinese people put up a CCP flag in front of their homes. Some even changed the image of the home screen on their cell phone to the CCP flag. Some Chinese students printed a CCP flag with "I am a Chinese citizen" in both Chinese and Ukrainian, and carry this paper sign with them as they couldn't buy a real one. A female Chinese student even painted a CCP flag with her lipstick, as she didn't even have a printer. At that time, they all believed that the CCP flag had a magical power to protect them during the war, because China is so powerful and nobody dares to violate overseas Chinese. But their excitement and imagination were soon shattered by reality. Because of the CCP's open support for Russia, Chinese people soon found that the CCP flag was not a magic protective charm, as claimed by the CCP embassy. Instead, a CCP flag and the claim that "I'm a Chinese citizen" will get them in trouble, as Ukrainians hate the fact that the CCP is supporting Russia and Putin's invasion. So, in no more than 2 days, on February 26, the CCP's embassy in Ukraine issued another notice saying that since the war was accelerating, Chinese citizens in Ukraine might encounter safety issues such as verbal abuse or even gunshots. Therefore, Chinese citizens should avoid identifying themselves or displaying any signs that can be used to identify them. Well, I think they are, of course, too embarrassed to say, "Don't say you are Chinese, don't put up a Chinese flag, otherwise you'll be in danger." So they only vaguely say something like, "You should avoid identify yourself." Chinese citizens soon discovered the hostility they were facing. So some said on social media that they dare not say they are Chinese anymore. Instead, they say they are Japanese. So that's how the sentence "I'm Japanese" in Ukraine came about. Overall, Chinese citizens in Ukraine were pretty much left on their own. The CCP embassy didn't offer much help. This chat record says that the Chinese embassy said that it was impossible for the embassy to arrange evacuations and asked Chinese students to hide in refugee camps in Moldova until March 6. Then the Chinese embassy would try to get them back to Kiev. It seemed that the Chinese embassy thought at that time that the war would be over on March 6. I heard that was Russia's plan. So this again is another piece of evidence showing that the CCP knew Russia's plan. This is a screenshot from a video showing 138 Chinese students trapped in a bomb shelter in the Sami region in Ukraine on March 3rd. They posted a video online and called for urgent help, saying that the nearby train stations and the bridges were all bombed, and they were running out of supplies and needed urgent help. Some Chinese students called the embassy and cried for help, but didn't get any. It was reported that about 3,000 Chinese citizens had left Ukraine by March 6, most of them by train, bus, or car. In the first 4 days, only some 80 Chinese citizens in Kiev were arranged to leave by the Chinese embassy. All other people left on their own. They mostly went to Poland, Moldova, or Romania. Some Chinese business groups did manage to get some charter flights to fly Chinese citizens back to China, but the ticket was as expensive as 18,000 yuan, or nearly $3,000. Remember, more than 600 million people in China earn less than 1,000 yuan per month. So 18,000 yuan could be 2 years' income for one ticket back to China. Later on, the ticket price rose to 30,000 yuan. When they arrived in China, they had to spend another 10,000 yuan, or about $1,600 to quarantine themselves in the hotel. Many Chinese students complained on the internet that they just couldn't afford it. They asked, why even India can get their citizens back for free while we have to pay so much? On March 3rd, Ukrainian media reported that 13 students from the National Academy of Arts and Letters were killed by Russian bombs. 4 of them were Chinese students. However, the CCP denied that any Chinese students were killed. And this is a notice issued by the CCP embassy on March 7th, asking those who are still in Ukraine to leave as soon as possible. Well, that's the story behind I'm Japanese in Ukraine. It's always the poor Chinese people who pay the bills for what the CCP does or says. Next, let's briefly talk about the CCP's role in the Russia-Ukraine war. Let's first watch a short video to see how a little boy in China explains the Russia-Ukraine war. Please make sure you read the English subtitles I added.
把乌克兰拉入北约同盟国，而北约同盟国呢，恰巧是就针对俄罗斯的。美军在那个俄罗斯边境啊部署了大量的军队，只有乌克兰和俄罗斯这一条边境没有被美军部署，美军也不敢去那儿部署，因为他没有那个权利去那边派兵和部署。所以说，美军想把那个乌克兰给拉入到他的北约同盟国里面来，这样只要乌克兰是北约的，他就可以进行派兵。 然后就把俄罗斯给团团围住，最后给他一口一口的给他吃掉。但是美国那个俄罗斯的普京大帝一看，哎，都来到家门口了，不能惯着他呀。于是，在那个2022年2月24日10时，那个俄军展开了一场特别的军事行动。为什么要说是特别的军事行动呢？因为。 哎，人家说了这个宣战啊，多不好意思啊，把人家都有防备了，拿特别军事行动来说呀，所以这件事情跟你们没关系。但是乌克兰不知道，他这场军事行动针对的就是他自己。然后俄军就在那个距离乌克兰最近的军事基地，把所有的战斗机、轰炸机全部派出了，仅花了2个小时的时间，那个乌克兰啊，整个军队溃不成军，俄军把乌克兰所有的机场、船港还有军事基地全部给炸了一番。那个普京就认为那个乌克兰啊，实际上就是一直想帮助美国，所以我们先要去打掉乌克兰，然后并警告美国来了一场下马威，然后来了一场杀鸡给猴看。
那乌克兰为什么要加入北约同盟国？
苏联解体后，那个乌克兰那边就留下了2100余枚核弹头，然后这些核弹头呢，恰好可以对各个国家产生打击。而美国一想啊，有2100枚核弹头，这么好的事情，可能 能会对俄罗斯展开巨大的打击，所以就想把那个乌克兰给靠拢过来，让他加入自己，最后联合攻击俄罗斯，然后最后把俄罗斯给吞掉。
Well, what do you think? Did you notice that he called Putin the Great Emperor Putin? This boy still has a red scarf around his neck, which shows he's still in primary school and younger than 12 years old. So as a little boy who isn't even 12, where did he get his ideas about the Russia-Ukraine war? It could only be from the CCP allowed propaganda, right? So what he says represents what the CCP has been telling its citizens. We talked about how the CCP gave Putin more than 300 billion worth of contracts when Putin attended the Beijing Olympics. The CCP also lifted the ban on Russian wheat one day before the Russian invasion. Right now, after Visa and MasterCard suspended the Russian operation, Russian banks are switching to Chinese UnionPay instead. Didn't I say last time that the CCP had managed to disable the West sanctions on Russia? Apart from the CCP's official support, the brainwashed little pinkies have shown their support in many other ways. For example, this post by a high school principal in Shandong province in China says that he has helped 6 high schools offer Russian language classes and will hire a lot of Russian language teachers from Russia next year for the entire province. He also suggested that the Russian language should replace English in China's entrance exams for college, while Russia should also consider replacing English with Chinese in Russia's entrance exams for colleges. He also says that trade between Russia and China will soon explode as China can import a lot of natural resources from Russia and export a lot of Chinese products to Russia. He asks, if Russia falls this time, which country will be the next? You can see that this post of his got 34,000 likes, 3,163 comments, and 695 shares. While many Chinese little pinkies are vigorously buying Russian products via Chinese e-commerce platforms to show their support. So some Chinese people are saying that without the CCP's support, Putin wouldn't have been so bold as to go ahead with his invasion. Then why would the CCP support Russia? This could be some of the reasons. 1, to divert the US focus and reduce pressure on the CCP. 2, to exchange for Russia's support when the CCP invades Taiwan. The logic is quite simple. If I support your invasion now, you should support me back. 3, to force Russia to become more dependent on the CCP in the face of sanctions from the West. And 4, to gain more leverage internationally, as the international community will need the CCP to mediate in order to facilitate a ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine. Well, those could be the CCP's motives, but will the CCP gain what they want? Probably not. What has happened recently has surprised so many of us. Like an old Chinese saying says, human calculations will never outwit heaven's plans. The CCP might want to push Russia to the front to take bullets from the West and hide behind to take advantage of the situation. However, it seems that nobody was fooled by the CCP this time. More and more people have seen the true colors of the CCP through all these events. So it is very likely that the Russia-Ukraine war will not delay the CCP's fall. On the contrary, it may accelerate it. Would you agree? Well, that's all for today. Thank you very much for watching. YouTube is still suppressing my channel heavily. People told me that they didn't see some of my videos, although they've subscribed and turned on the notification bell. So please consider signing up for a membership at my website, jenniferzengblog.com, so that you can get a notification when I post new scripts, audios, and videos. Also, by the way, I will travel to Texas to do an in-studio interview with young Americans against socialism on Thursday. So there will be no more shows for this week, but I'll see you next week. Thank you. See you next time.